A year after divorce, my ex-wife's shocking request left me speechless. A year had passed since my separation from Emily, and my life had taken an entirely unexpected turn. I had moved into a modest apartment downtown, far from the house that had once echoed with the remnants of our shared life. My days had become calmer, filled with work, reading, and the occasional social gathering. It was a simple existence, free of any pretensions, yet it brought the peace I had longed for after the storm of our breakup. Since the final court proceedings, Emily and I had kept a strict silence, neither of us reaching out. The wounds from our separation were still fresh, and I convinced myself that the distance was for the best. I doubted my ability to face her without the resurfacing of anger and resentment. Then, one cold November evening, as I settled in for a quiet night, there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I was completely taken aback when I opened it to find Emily standing there. She looked hesitant, her posture uncertain, and her eyes held a mix of resolve and nervousness. "James," she spoke gently at first, her voice wavering. "Emily, what are you doing here?" I finally asked, my mind racing with confusion and cautious curiosity. "I know this is unexpected, but I need to talk to you. It's important." A ton of questions raced through my head. Was she here to reopen old wounds, or had something serious happened? Despite my better judgment, I stepped aside and gestured for her to come in. She slowly entered, sitting on the very edge of my sofa, her body tense. I sat across from her, keeping my distance, unsure whether I was prepared to hear what she was about to say. "It's about my father," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. "Your father?" I frowned. "Richard," she went on. Richard had been a continual source of friction in our relationship from the beginning. He had always expressed his belief that I was unworthy of his daughter. His persistent meddling had led to innumerable disputes between Emily and me, further eroding our marriage. "He's seriously unwell," she continued. I questioned, perplexed. "Why would he want to see me?" Her eyes welled with unshed tears as she added, "The doctor said he doesn't have much time left. He wants to apologize, James. He feels accountable for what transpired between us." She hesitated, taking a deep breath before finishing. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. After doing everything he could to drive a wedge between us, Richard now wanted to reconcile. Part of me wanted to laugh at the irony, but another part of me felt anger rise to the surface. I looked at Emily, unsure how to respond. After a lengthy pause, I said, "This feels complicated." "I know it's a lot to ask," she spoke rapidly, pleading. "But it would mean a lot to both him and me." After what seemed like an eternity, I nodded slowly. "All right." Despite everything that had happened, the hurt, the betrayal, I still cared about her. 2 days later, I found myself standing outside Richard's hospital room, bracing for the unexpected encounter ahead. My heart raced as Emily stood beside me, her expression unreadable. Her usual composure hid whatever emotions she might have been feeling. After a brief, almost imperceptible signal from her, I reached out and opened the door. Inside, the man I had once known as formidable and imposing now looked frail and diminished. Richard sat in a chair, his pale skin and thinner frame stark reminders of his condition. When he saw me, his eyes sparkled with emotion, his face lighting up with a faint but genuine smile despite the obvious effort it took to stay awake. "James," he replied in a firm, rugged voice, with a sincerity that surprised me. "Thank you for coming." I nodded. He drew a shallow breath before continuing. "I've been thinking a lot about the past." I wasn't sure how to respond as a storm of emotions swirled inside me. For a long time, I had held resentment toward this man, blaming him for much of the tension in my marriage. And now, here he was, vulnerable and seeking something I hadn't expected, closure. Richard's words struck me like a powerful wave, sending an unexpected ache to my chest. "I realize now how much I upset things for you and Emily. I thought I was protecting her, but all I did was hurt you both." It was shocking and oddly comforting to hear him admit his part in the suffering that had shaped so much of my life. My throat constricted, and I was momentarily silent until I could finally reply. "Thank you for saying that. But Emily and I made our own mistakes, so it wasn't entirely your fault." Richard's eyes softened, and a faint smile touched the corners of his mouth. He whispered, But I hope you can forgive an old man for his part in it." I swallowed hard, feeling a mixture of relief, pity, and an odd sense of release. "I forgive you," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. That conversation marked a turning point. After a period of bitterness and distance, it opened a path for Emily and me to reconnect, not as a couple, but as allies in a shared effort to support her father in his last days. Rather than rehash old arguments or dwell on past hurts, we focused on the present and how we could be there for Richard and for each other during such a trying time. For the first time in years, I was able to look at Emily without feeling angry or resentful. Instead, there was a sense of peace and recognition of the good times we had shared and the growth that had emerged from our struggles. Richard passed away a few weeks later. Emily and I stood side by side at his funeral, united not by love, but by a quiet mutual respect. In the days that followed, we found ourselves talking, not about the mistakes we had made, but about the memories we had shared, the lessons we had learned, and the people we had become. We didn't reunite, but that chapter of our lives had come to an end. Months later, I received an unexpected letter in the mail from Richard's attorney. Inside, it said he had left me a small bequest. The letter included a handwritten note and the money. "James, I appreciate your forgiveness. Use this to start something new. You deserve it. Richard." As I read the note, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. Simple yet profound, Richard's words were a final act of generosity and affirmation. That night, when Emily knocked on my door, I never thought it would lead to this. Not a romance comeback, but a journey toward healing. I realized that life can surprise you, and forgiveness is one of the best gifts you can give, to others and to yourself.